Today is Sunday, January 18th, 2026. Happy New Year. It's been a month since I recorded an episode. Insurance is today's topic, and I really don't like this subject, but I feel obligated to share with you this messy, complicated, and very icky part of the process. It may be worse than the legal contracts, in my opinion. Starting at the very top, your lawyer will write a contract that represents a legal and binding agreement between you and your surrogate. And that includes financial exposure on your part in the event that something goes terribly wrong. For example, God forbid your surrogate dies. This is a simple example and the easiest one to understand. And, at least in Texas, it's required by law to be in every surrogacy contract. In mine, it says if my surrogate dies, her family gets $500,000. I have two choices. I can buy an insurance policy or self-insure, which basically means I pay this out of pocket. This one is a no-brainer. No one has $500,000 lying around, and my policy will cost me only $800. So I'd rather pay that than run the risk, no matter how small, that I have to cough up $500,000. This is the basic decision you have to make for every similar situation in your contract. The order in which these insurance options were presented to me was a bit odd. My surrogacy agency sent me an email saying it was time to pick insurance with a list of about 10 items to consider with some details about premiums. And then a link to a website for a company called International Fertility Insurance, or IFI, who sells all the policies that my agency will purchase on my behalf. They are essentially an insurance broker. Since my contract hasn't been written yet, I figured out that I only need to care about things in my contract. So I thought this was backwards. It's like going to a Chinese restaurant ready to order General's chicken because that's what your partner wants, but you don't know that yet because they haven't told you. And when you get there, they hand you a 20-page menu and ask you to look at 100 different options when General's chicken is all you need. But again, you don't know that because no one has told you. Excuse me. So I wrote my agency and asked them to clarify, and I was correct. The only things I need to worry about are the things in my contract. What I didn't know was that my surrogate and I had signed a match sheet back in November that basically outlines what the surrogate gets and what I'm on the hook for, although no one explained this at the time. That match sheet is not a legal binding contract, but it feeds into the contract and serves as a starting point. So now it was starting to make sense. Long story short, I had already jumped onto ChatGPT and asked it 1,000 questions. It was extremely useful. It came back and said, of the 10 things you're considering, you must buy these 4. These other 4 are a waste of money. And these 2 your lawyer can control by capping them in your contract. So I had a very good understanding of the landscape when I had a call with my surrogacy agency a few weeks later. They spelled it all out very clearly. And what was most helpful was that she guided and advised me by telling me what most other intended parents buy versus me starting with the insurance company, whose job it is to sell as much insurance as possible, and so many things I don't really need. I did speak to them a week later, and I must say this was the correct order to do it in. First, ChatGPT to get grounded, then your agency, and then the insurance company. Because by that time, all you have left are very specific questions about coverage and premiums. You're not starting there and going in blind. As I always say, the more informed you are, the better, because it means you'll be asking the right questions instead of calling with no idea what insurance even is or why it's needed. And the insurance broker really appreciates that. You've done your homework. First, because it saves them a lot of time explaining it all to you. But I also learned that they are only the broker of the policies. And if you have questions they cannot answer, they will send a sample policy for you to dig into the weeds, which means in the end, it's buyer beware. And if a policy doesn't work the way you thought, it's your fault for not reading the policy. But no one, including me, is going to read these policies. So, here are the 5 policies I'm likely to buy, and then I'll talk about a few I will likely not buy and why. In the order in which things happen, you don't buy them all at the same time, and they have different durations. Here are the yeses. First is IVF complications. This one is cheap and simple. It's to cover things that go wrong from the point of medication to the transfer of the embryo. About $310 per transfer. Although you can buy for unlimited transfers with the same surrogate for 18 months for maybe $100 more. Second is loss of reproductive organs. This covers a full hysterectomy or partial loss of organs. Highly unlikely, but it's in the contract. Only about $280 in my case. The third is short-term disability with bed rest. This is if she cannot work for whatever reason during the pregnancy and includes being confined to bed rest. It covers her wages, childcare, and housekeeping. This one has to be quoted very specifically using her salary or hourly rate. It's the most expensive at almost $5,000 for me. But when I do the math, if I didn't have this, it would cost me $3,000 every single week she's on bed rest. So despite $5K sounding like a lot, it pays for itself in just 2 weeks. You get to pick the number of weeks, either 12, 16, or 20. After that, you're paying out of pocket. Plus the first 7 days are not covered, and they pay only 90% of her wages, so you're paying for the first week in full, plus 10% of them for every week that she's on bed rest. The fourth is life insurance, which I already discussed. Pretty simple. The only other point is that they have options that will also pay the intended parent. For example, $500,000 to the surrogate's family and $100,000 to me. I thought this was like regular life insurance, but it's not, so I'm glad I asked about this. The payout to me is to recoup unrecoverable costs, so I have to submit receipts. An example would be, I have to find a new surrogate and my agency charges me the agency fee I already paid them. I paid them $36,000. If my surrogate dies and they charge me again, this is a good example of something that would be covered. Once I heard this, I thought, no way am I buying this. If any of these things happens, I'd be emotionally wrecked and not in a position to dig up receipts and fight with an insurance company. I don't think it's worth my time, and so unlikely that this would ever happen. Here are the maybes. First is hospital indemnity. This one is really weird. It's a flat payout of $1,000 plus $300 per full day that she's hospitalized. But it doesn't pay me, it pays her, which means it doesn't change my financial obligations. So it's more icing on the cake or goodwill or whatever you want to call it. Unless your contract says that any payout reduces your financial obligations dollar for dollar, you are still paying the same amount. You're paying for this policy and this money goes to her. If you do write this in your contract, I'm not sure how this works logistically and would be wary of it getting missed in the execution. I mean, it has to be blatantly clear to whomever is paying these bills from my escrow that she's got a payout and that my obligation is reduced because of that. It costs $280. Second maybe is maternity backup insurance. This is for situations where the surrogate has no medical insurance or the policy she has does not cover the pregnancy. My surrogate's policy covers surrogate pregnancy, so I don't need this. However, if something changes, that is, she loses her job in this coverage, or something changes when we roll into 2027 and she's still pregnant next year, I run the risk of the pregnancy no longer being covered at some point. So the backup insurance is your plan B. There are two options. You can buy a policy on the exchange, otherwise known as ACA. This can be quite risky because you need to know if policies that cover surrogate pregnancy exist in the state your surrogate lives in. And even if they do, the plan may not be there when you go to buy it because these change all the time. The second option is to buy a policy through IFI. This is extremely expensive. It's $2,000 to buy it and then $26,000 to activate it. That's insanely high. I've been buying policies on the ACA for the past 8 years, and it's easily $1,000 a month or $12,000 a year for a single person. This is more than twice that. But when I learned that the hospital bills for pregnancy can reach $75,000, you're getting insurance to cover $50,000 that you'd have to pay out of pocket. I'm really on the fence on this one. And third is miscarriage/stillbirth, which is fairly new. I'd originally planned to buy this, but changed my mind once I spoke to IFI. And that's because it works the same way as life insurance. They don't just write you a check. You have to submit a claim with unrecoverable costs. Plus, they don't consider it a miscarriage until week 13, and then stillbirth kicks in at week 20, which I think is odd. Isn't the real world definition of a miscarriage any loss of the fetus prior to 13 weeks. Again, if this were to happen, the last thing I want to do is get mired down with fighting with an insurance company for money. Here are the definite no's. Permanent disability, I'm not buying because it's not needed, because the contract doesn't require this. Newborn insurance, I also don't need because I have medical insurance that will cover the baby. The way this works is that having a baby is considered a life event. Once the baby comes out, my insurance starts and the surrogate's ends. I have 30 days to add the baby to my policy, and it's retroactive to the date of birth. I've already confirmed that the hospital my surrogate has chosen is in network, which is great. This is much easier than me shopping for a brand new policy on the exchange and having to make sure her maternity hospital is in network. But my challenge is that I have to keep my insurance in place for the next 18 months. And it's a bit of a tenuous situation. I have this weird 13-week coverage through Comcast, which only continues if I work on one of their projects at least once every 13 weeks. If it ends, I can extend it through Cobra, but that costs $1,000 a month. And I believe I cannot have a life event while on Cobra, which means I cannot add a dependent. Even if it starts up again with me as a new hire or a rehire, I can restart it, but cannot really add a dependent without the baby because they ask for its name, social, etc. Social Security, that is. So I basically have to have this insurance in place the minute the baby is born so I can add them as a dependent, and only then am I safe to let it lapse and continue that same coverage through Cobra. Finally, IFI also has something called medical billing management. It's not insurance, but instead a service that will review all the claims looking for errors to make sure you're not paying for something twice or paying more than you should. They claim that 80% of medical bills have errors. This is a whopping $2,000, but could easily save you more than that. You'll probably never know because I don't think they notify you of errors. In either case, I don't want to spend a single minute fiddling with the medical bills, and I'm happy to farm this out to them. Hope this was helpful. I'm not an insurance expert, but I feel like you will get out of this part what you put into it. In the end, if none of these situations occur, then you've wasted a ton of money. In my case, I think it's going to be at least $10,000. But you can rest assured that if you hadn't bought the insurance, you might have fallen victim to a horrible outcome that would wipe you out financially. And that's much scarier than wasting money on policies that were never used. I think my next episode will focus on the surrogate contract, another thing I dread but have to get through in order to make this happen. My agency told me this is currently being drafted, so I'm just waiting for my attorney to send it my way. And then the fun begins. Just kidding.